Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the Civivi Knives Plethiros. First off, I want to thank very much my buddy Nehemiah over at the Metal Effort channel here on the YouTube for donating this guy along. He basically said, you know, Nick, I got one of these guys and I want to do something nice with it. And so he donated it to the channel, and I'll put it in the next charitable giveaway. That's a beautiful thing. Thank you for that, Nehemiah. Next thing, let's do a size comparison real quick, because this isn't a tiny knife. Here it is against the Spyderco PM2. Here it is against the Spyderco Delica here, and here it is against, whoa there, the Ontario Rat number 2. And so you can see here that in terms of overall sharpened blade length, this guy actually has a much longer blade than the Spyderco PM2, although the sharpened blade, that is. But the handle itself is actually a little bit smaller than the PM2. And we'll kind of touch on that later, and then, yeah, here it is with your Rat 2. This is actually not a tiny knife, and we'll go ahead and do a measurement real quick, probably on the knife I'm talking about. This guy is coming in a little bit over 3.5 inches, like 3.7, someplace in that vicinity. She can look that up online. But regardless, it's going to be over 3.5. So there you go. And then finally, a quick note on the name. The Plethiros. So this is actually designed by Elijah Isham. He's a nice guy, generally speaking. Weird designer. Both, I think, generally as a human, said with respect, and also as a designer. But he is he's been doing a lot of interesting stuff in the knife world. And I actually messaged him, actually this morning, asking him, you know, okay, Elijah, I'm getting ready to do the Plethiros review. What the heck does Plethiros mean? Because I couldn't find, I would Google this knife's freaking name, and the only references I would find are to the knife. And he messaged back, oh, I just made it up. Like, okay, freaking thank you. I'm like looking up Greek roots here and trying to, nope, it's just gibberish, but it's cool sounding gibberish. So he said it's like it'll handle a plethora of tasks. Okay, sly bastard. Anyways, so this is with Elijah Isham. It has absolutely no name except the name that was made up for it. And then it is a Civivi knife, so it's being made by We Knives budget brand. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting, very gibberishly named pocket knife right here. So on the good side, to start with, it has a very reliable action. What I mean by that is that this knife will deploy when you pull the flipper tab. There's not really any question about that. It deploys reliably. There is no worry. I will tend to give things a little bit more risk because a lot of the time I'm carrying flippers that are, well, a little bit less, the actions aren't as good, but this absolutely will deploy. It also has a very subtle flipper tab on the top here, because you can see here, unlike a lot of flipper knives, do I really not have a pocket pecking flipper around here anywhere? Oh yeah, here I do. This is the Hogue Micro something or another. Oh, come on. Either way, it's a Hogue. It's small. But anyways, this little guy has a pocket pecker on the back there, a flipper tab that will be pecking on whatever's in your pocket, whereas this guy, you can see, this guy hangs in the pocket in such a way that this flipper tab really never has the opportunity to interact with anything in your pocket, to attack your phone, etc. So that's a beautiful thing. Next thing, the way this knife has been designed, you actually have a fair amount of grip on it, because you will never slide up onto the blade, because you have this little region right here, complete with the lock bar going on right here. So that's actually a nice thing. And it also gives you the ability to choke up a little bit for detail work if you'd like. It, you know, comes right in this area here. That's a beautiful thing. Next thing, the clip on this guy is pretty good. It's just a relatively vanilla metal bent clip, but it works. And it also mounts to both sides, which will be a nice thing for some lefties out there in the world. Next thing, this guy is a very compact little knife for the amount of blade that you've got on it. What I mean by that, well there, really. Oh, it's very reliable. Then under a camera, trying to avoid hitting the phone, I screw it up. But anyways, this has a fair amount of blade in there, packed in for a relatively small size. Like I said, we're coming in over 3.5 inches here. And we're doing that in a package here that is actually not all that much farther. Well, okay, it's over 3.5, but still, this guy packs in more usable cutting length than the PM2, and it does it in a size that is markedly smaller than the PM2, which is actually kind of a nice thing. This has a very real bigger on the inside sense that I think is kind of neat. And if you're looking for a knife that is relatively big in blade but relatively small in handle, this is a nice way to go for it. Next thing, this guy has a carbon fiber and G10 sort of look to it. Look, the carbon fiber is sort of a sticker on top of the G10, but it ends up looking nice, and the way they did a little of the contouring looks pretty good. Next thing, price-wise, this is $75. Now look, that's not a bad price particularly. It's D2 steel, etc. That's good to know, but you know, generally speaking, This is a pretty solid choice. And it's hitting that mid-range that is kind of being neglected lately here in the knife world. You know, that 50 to $100 range. There's really not all that much interesting going on here, and this is sliding right nicely into that little gap. It's a relatively budget-friendly knife, at least compared to a lot of the Rococo stuff that I put on the channel, but still, that's something to keep in mind. And then finally, on the good side, this is very much an Isham design. This is something that may be a good thing to some people, maybe a bad thing to other people. I happen to really like his work. I think he does really neat stuff. You know, some of it is more or less to my taste, but this had very much the feeling of that. You look at it and you're like, oh yeah, Elijah was involved. But at the same time, you also can do work with it, right? It's not so completely far out and over the top like the Eschaton, for instance, where it's just like, oh, okay, that's an art piece. No, this is sort of a nice fusion of that. So I think it's weird enough that you're like, oh yeah, Elijah. But on the other side, though, it also is a knife that will work for everyday life. And so to me, all of that is the good. It's a very Isham design. $75. The carbon fiber G10 mix looks pretty good. It's very compact for the amount of blade here. It's got a solid clip. It is pretty much impossible to slide up onto the blade here, and it has a very reliable action. On the great side, honestly, this has a very, very nice little blade to it. And I mean that in a couple of ways. I mean, it is surprisingly big for the handle. We talked about that already. But it's also just a good blade. It's D2 steel, which is absolutely a good-to-go sort of steel, especially in this sort of a price bracket here. But it also is super thin behind the edge. If you kind of zoom in there, you can see, well, actually, it may even be difficult for you to see just how damn thin this thing gets. But at the tip here, it's a very, very thin little knife. It's really, really nice. It cuts very, very well. And it sharpens up very well. I actually sharpen this guy myself. This isn't the factory edge, but that doesn't super matter. But it sharpens up well. It's got a nice tall grind to it. It's full flat. Even the blade finish is actually pretty nice. A lot of times you'll get sort of ho-hum finishes out of the Wii and the Civivi line, but this is actually pretty decent. I'm just pretty impressed with this blade overall. This is a very nice blade for putting in work. I like it a lot. And so to me, at least, that's what's great here. So it is a very nice blade. Which is just, you know, it's good to go. It really, really does good work. And I hope to see more knives from Wii and Civivi that are ground as well as this one is. So there you go. That's the great. On the bad side, this is the Hogue Micro Flip. That's the freaking name of it. Anyways, on the bad side, that's not on the bad side. That's information that I forgot because I was an idiot. Well, I'm still an idiot. Anyways, I digress. On the bad side, ergonomics on this guy. They're okay. You know, it feels a little bit better than it looks like it should, if that makes sense. You look at this, you're like, oh, really? But for me and my relatively small hands, it's okay. You can definitely feel the liner poking up here at you. There's a little bit of crowding here. And if I choke up in this direction, it's actually a little bit nicer, but then I get little hot spots off of here and whatnot. And you also get a little bit off the clip. It's not terrible, but and frankly, like I said, it's better than it looks like it might be, but it's still, the ergos are just okay on this guy. Next thing, the lock bar access is not great. What's funny is you can see how proud the lock bar is of the liner here, but because there's no scoop at all on this side, what you're really doing is sort of doing that jam your thumb to the side and hope for the best sort of approach, rather than actually being able to reach in and disengage the liner lock in the sense that you can when there's a dedicated cutout for it. So I'm not a big fan of the lock bar access here, and each time it's just a little bit like, you're just jamming your thumb in there and hoping for the best. I'm not a big fan of that. Next thing, I have to say, I'm a little disappointed in Civivi, just generally speaking, for going downhill in their actions. When you first got, like, the Civivi Praxis, or this is the Praxis here, or the Backlash, they had these just amazing actions, where it was just like, this is an action every bit as good as a much higher-end knife. This is not that. I mean, it's a fine action. It works, it's reliable, but it's not a great action. It's not like, oh my god, yes, in any way, shape, or form. Both the Anthropos and, to a lesser extent, this guy, have had actions that have been like, okay. It's not universal. The McKenna is actually quite good. This is the Damascus McKenna they've got going on there, but nevertheless, I was a little disappointed in the action on this guy. It feels like it's done differently, either by a different factory or just a different specs or something like that. And, you know, especially given how impressive the action was on these ones back when, it feels like Civivi's gone a little downhill on that front. I'm not a fan of that. And finally, on the bad side, this is a little bit more amorphous, but at some level, this guy is... It's starting to get a little bit tricky to tell some of these apart, right? You've got the Zeta, which kind of looks a lot like this, the Plethiros, which is this guy, the Anthropos, the Eterna, which hasn't been released yet, I don't think, but he's done a bunch of knives that sort of feel in this vicinity. He's done some stuff that's completely out of that, like the Arrakis, the Eschaton. Even you could argue the McKenna is sort of a very different piece. being a front flipper and whatnot. But nevertheless, they're starting to feel a little bit less special. And in some cases, I'm kind of having to look at them and compare with myself like, okay, how is this one different? And that's not a great feeling. And so I kind of hope Elijah is going to calm it down a little bit and focus on quality of releases, not quantity. Not that this is a bad release or anything like that, but it just feels like the market's a little bit flooded. And so I'd like for him to take a little bit of a moment here to kind of back off and really, really do something a little bit different next time. I don't know, not a big deal, but nevertheless, it just starts to feel they start to run together a little bit. And anytime someone says, oh, have you seen the new Elijah design? You're like, oh, which one? Is that the one with the kind of the crooked back and the wedgy blade? Well, yeah, but that means anyways, I digress. So, to me, at least, all of that is the bad, is that there's been a bunch of these little guys lately. The action is not on par with the Backlash or Praxis, what those used to be. And this, by the way, was a much cheaper knife at $40. The lock bar access isn't amazing. The ergos are just kind of okay on it. On the ugly front, there's not really anything ugly on this, guy. So let's just go ahead and go to the final conclusion. And that conclusion for me is that this is a nice little knife. I mean, it's relatively inexpensive. It's, certainly it's not cheap. It's $75, but, it's something that I think most people could reliably save up towards. It's got a nice, unique design. It's got a weirdly large blade for a relatively small handle. It's got an action that's pretty reliable and a blade that is very nicely done. At least the blade they're doing absolutely right here. That's good. The ergos aren't amazing. The action's not impressive. Lock bar access ain't great, and it does feel a little bit lost in a sea of relatively similar pieces. But honestly, those issues aren't huge problems. And I think this is going to be a knife that's going to be solid for a bunch of folks. So ultimately, people are going to ask me, oh my God, Nick, should I buy one? Well, I mean, that's honestly not so hard to figure out. I mean, to start with, do you like the design? Well, if not, don't buy the knife. I mean, case closed. At some level, Elijah's work, I know, is not for everybody. And so if you're looking at this and you're like, no, that's ugly, then don't buy the knife. That's easy. Go away. In a very nice way, come back in another day. But anyways, if you're not sure whether you like this knife, then wait 20 minutes, and there's probably going to be another one that's not so far different from it. But if you like this design, and the other thing is, if you like this design and you want to spend a little bit more money to get something that is with a really amazing action, etc., go and look at one of the Wii versions of some of his stuff. I mean, like the Zeta, I think was it the Theta? No, the Zeta was Wii. I think it might be out of production, maybe, but it's very similar to this guy and was really pretty compelling. But you can find a bunch of his higher-end stuff from Wii Knives, and there it'll be made a little nicer with better action, better materials, etc. So you can consider that. But if you're looking at this, you like the design, and you like this price point, then buy the damn knife. You'll be very happy with it. And even if the word for the knife doesn't make a whole lot of sense, at least the knife itself probably will. So there you go. I hope this has been interesting to you, that I highlighted a plethiros of very good points for you, and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.